How to transform the business games at hand into fascinating and performative work experiences. This is the underlying question and objective of the Ludic Enterprise Interaction Design Framework. Make work play for winning the business game. There are 6 elements of this framework. First, we will have to talk about the business objectives that we want to achieve with our intervention. Second, we have to look at the desired behavior that should lead to the fulfillment of the objective. Third, we have to decode the playing field. And fourth, assess the players, and yes, they're different ones. And number 5, you might say it's a core, we have to apply game mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics in order to evoke the work experiences. And last but not least, we have to look at controlling our game and making sure that our underlying objectives are really met and that the work experience is consistent and in line with our expectations. So let's talk about business objectives. What is the problem? What is the urgent need you have? What is the objective at hand that you would like to achieve and that is critical for success of the enterprise? It could be almost anything. It could be your employees are more attentive, more engaged, that they become creative, that they interchange more often, to collaborate better, to exchange ideas, to control themselves, to work in a more playful or a more concentrated manner. It could be almost anything. It could be achieve more sales numbers, reduce costs. Almost any kind of game is imaginable and being played all the time in companies. So the business objective usually goes along with the business model of your company and your value processes, your value proposition. Okay, but maybe we shouldn't go into defining the whole company game, but look into a tiny little detail where we want to put our hands on. So, for example, let's take a project meeting challenge. We all know this problem. Team meetings are not engaging, they are not productive, time consuming, and at the end there's no clear result and no outcome. So a clear project meeting challenge could mean that what do we have to do to create more engaging, productive and less time consuming meetings measured by average duration, active participation of everyone and clear goals as outcomes. You can also already see here that the objectives can be measured, and a clear measurement is important because we need to make sure that at the end of the day we can see the result of our intervention. So keep your business objectives in mind. They are the beginning and the end of what we have to look at. We are not just creating games for game's sake. We are creating experiences, performative work experiences that are performative because they lead to the fulfillment of the objectives of our organization. We have to translate the business objectives into desired behavior. I mean real behavior, what people do. And enterprise gamification works by eliciting and reinforcing this desired behavior in individuals and groups. So concentrate your attention on a particular task or work faster. Break up routines or research individually. Exchange in groups, work towards goals, fill out forms. that these behavior patterns can be very trivial, but we have to make sure that we know exactly what kind of behavior, could be cognitive or physical behavior, is an important step to fulfill the objectives that we have in the back of our heads. So we have to translate in the second step the business objectives into the desired behavior that we want to elicit in our employees. So the task that we have in this section is we have to define clearly which concrete behavior and habits will ensure the business objectives. So when we look at the project meeting challenge, we could say, okay, we want that everyone speaks up on past performance, so that everyone has a voice. Everyone will at least comment once, and there's a list with tasks, deadlines, and responsibilities as an outcome. That would be already something for a project meeting. And running effective project meetings is an art that is rarely encountered. So this could be the desired behavior. What do we have to do to make it happen? Before we jump to conclusions, we still keep on analyzing what's going on. Especially, we have to decode the playing field. A company is not just a game, it's the overlapping of various games. So what are the games the employees are exposed to? And some of them might hinder us from showing the desired behavior. Maybe people are incentivized on individual goals that are contrary to our objective for the group. There might be power play within the organization, silo thinking between the different departments. Might be online distractions and people are more focused on their Facebook and LinkedIn account and their mobile phones than on your task at hand. There's maybe work overload. This work overload might stem from a lack of focused work, but still a problem. There's a lack of recognition in many organizations. And who wants to work for something where he doesn't get any recognition? And yes, several organizations have developed a low performance culture where people don't want to show their best. And if they do, they would get bullied by their colleagues saying, hey, you haven't really understood how we work here, right? If you play too hard, we will kick you out. So keep it slow. Yes, playing field decoding is very important. It's very important to understand the rules, the hidden rules, the real incentives, the multi-layered playing field that's always there. It's a multi-dimensional chessboard that we have to analyze. It's not just as obvious as have people that have no connection in the room and make them play. They will not accept it because they're kept and hidden in the games they play, and they might not be compatible. So let's analyze the roadblocks to task performance and address, remove, or alleviate them. Let's talk about our project meeting challenge again. So home office might be practiced extensively. Although this might be a good thing, it certainly hinders some analog games and a lot of innocuous interactions that happen when people are sitting in the same room. There might be a high fluctuation. And of course it is a challenge if you are meeting people for the first time all over because there's no consistency in the group. Maybe the department heads want to be informed in advance about everything the participants might say during the meeting. this is not unusual in hierarchical companies. And the department heads see it as their duty, obligation, and responsibility to act like this. But it obviously hinders the free play of the players in your situation. And last but not least, but also very common, is that the workload of the project that we are working on might be considered work on top instead of regular work. Here we come back to the lack of recognition. Still, we have to keep on analyzing. And why? Because individuals matters. Player assessment is very important. What kind of people are in the room? What kind of player types here are in the situation at hand? Do we have competitive players? Killers? People who want to win and see even other people lose? Or do we have socializers who are more interested in non-competitive social interaction? Nerdy explorers? Or power-grabbing individuals without deeper content? Intelligence and experience level of the employees, of our colleagues, very important. Maybe they don't want to play the introductory kindergarten games. They want to be treated as adults, as initiated. And yes, there might be task confidence. People might feel that they are experts, and maybe they are in the domain of what they're doing. And others might not feel very confident in what they're doing. Maybe they feel overwhelmed with the challenges at hand. Digitalization is challenging in many aspects for many people. And there might be psychological or even social problems in the room. If we have the pink elephant flying through the room all the time because we have a huge sociological or psychological problem in the room, people will be distracted and won't be able to play. So we have to take care of that elephant first in order to make sure that we can start the action that we actually want our employees to go through in order to reach the business objectives through the desired behavior that we want them to perform. Yeah, player assessment, of course, is an situational endeavor. In our project meeting challenge, we might say, hey, they're mostly non-competitive socializers in our group. There might be 2 nerdy and introvert explorers and 1 power grabber without deeper knowledge of the situation or the topic. And we might see that it's a fairly heterogeneous group as far as intellectual capabilities is concerned. So it is a challenge to bring these people into productive working mode. Yeah. Let's come to game mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. As I said in the beginning, this might be the core of our interaction design framework. The question is, what kind of game experience do we want to evoke? And what kind of mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics do we plan for? So mechanics are the essential components of the game. The rules, the options and actions the player can take, the algorithms in the game engine, and so on. The mechanics are the feedback loops, the actions, the little game elements. This is what we can plan. This is what we can bring to the table. The dynamics are the runtime behavior of the mechanics, acting on player input and cooperating with other mechanics. So this is like the dynamics, how we go through the different levels, how the different players are interacting with each other. This is something that is emerging. We cannot really understand how this is perceived and how this is developing. And last but not least, what are the emotional responses evoked in the player? This perceived aesthetics something that we can hardly predict. We can work on something like that, and we can find out how the perception of our game situation is, of how our interaction design is perceived, and it might be the best not to call it game but interaction design. And we might at the end come up with the aesthetics, and the players or the employees might say, oh, they feel good, productive, performative, creative, all of that. They feel aroused, and they feel happy, and they feel at one with the group. All of that, this is kind of the aesthetics that's behind it. But the mechanics that we put in the game to make it work is probably something that the players will not perceive. So this MDA framework is based on Hunicke, Leblanc, and Subeck, and it's a very interesting formal approach to game design and game research. You can actually use almost anything, but use a game design that is helpful, and you have to feel comfortable with it. When we look at the game mechanics, there's a plethora of game mechanics. The question is, what kind of game mechanics do you want to embed? Of course, there are the classical tools, points, badges, leaderboards. This is the 101 of gamification, because if we track performance through goals and points and badges and leaderboards, it almost smells like a game. It's like soccer. We have feedback loop, but this is of course just the beginning. We can create avatars, we can create personas, virtual goods that are more than just points. That we can create intellectual stimuli, and these kind of feedback loops and surprising elements will create experiences. We are trying to create little innocuous events that are perceived as experiences and will generate a flow in our players. Tools, controls, and progression. Let's talk about controls. The controls are timer, skill test, user turns, things like that. So there must be a challenge, right? And time boxing is a huge challenge, works wonders in any situation. So if you create a game without time boxing, it's probably a problem, especially in a business setting. There might be other areas where you say it's completely irrelevant and I have the time of my life, but timing and time boxing is a huge, important step. So a soccer match lasts 90 minutes. And it's very important that it only lasts 90 minutes. That makes the time more valuable. And this valuable and condensed time is perceived as an experience. So skill tests are important for evoking the feeling of mastery, of growth, of understanding. Hey, I now can achieve that. I've understood it. I've passed the test. I've fought the big boss, and hey, I won. I wasn't sure I was capable of that, but this is something that I've achieved. And yes, there might be user turns. There might be the elements that everyone has to do something that we have to clearly react to one another. Controls are good because controls are our feedback. They put us into a framework. We see, okay, this is the timing, this is what you have to do, this is how you will be graded, this is your level of mastery that is required, here is how you get. It's wonderful. Controls are good and very important. Control mechanisms are a recipe for a good game situation. And we have to think about progression. So as I said in talking about dynamics, yes, dynamics is how the gameplay evolves, but we have to make sure that this is well planned. And levels is a very good way of structuring this progression. You are structuring different aspects of your interaction. Could be a workshop, could be a gamified day, it could be a gamified interaction in whatever play. But if you have different levels show, oh, here you have completed something, and now you're entering a new level, and every beginning has a certain magic in it. Levels are good. Quests are good. Quests are adventures. Here, this is what you have to do. This is your challenge. This is where you have to go. This is your map. Find the treasure. Groups. Develop groups and have these groups interact with each other. Give them feedback. So over time, there will be evolving group dynamics. And even if you cannot plan fully how this group dynamics will evolve because you don't really know how the people work, you have to plan these group dynamics and create a journey. Create journeys, create narratives that will keep the story going. If the story has even an arc of tension, even better. So here you have the embedded narratives of the game. This is what the game designer, the interaction designer, puts into the game. Yeah. Game dynamics. What kind of game dynamics do we want to introduce? That's a question. Do we want to introduce competition? Have employees work against each other? Do we have clear limitations? Or do they have to cooperate? So with limitations, that might also be unnecessary obstacles that they have to surmount. But maybe they have to cooperate to win the game. What kind of achievements can they get? Do they get badges? Is there an element of chance or lottery? So if we have dices and the element of chance, this is, or by playing cards, for example, this will add dopamine to the experience, and we love that. We know that a bit of spiciness of lottery and chance will increase the work experience. If we can make choices, even better. If we have we could go to the left, we could go to the right. If we open play, wonderful. But maybe people could deviate as well. So maybe the illusion of free choices are wonderful, but only a few choices should be meaningful, and maybe the limitations are more important in the concept of business interactions here. And contextualize it. Here again, the contextualization probably would be a narrative, a story. There's a game story. We are on a life-saving mission, or we create something, or we are pirates, or we are on an interstellar ship, and we have to encounter and manage all the adventures that are on our way. If we put this into a whole story, and this story also evolves because the storytelling works like that, we have the impression that we are an active part of a movie, of a story. And this is an evolving game dynamic. If we talk about the game aesthetics, we are the interpreted narrative. So what comes and ends up with the players? What kind of game aesthetics do we want to suggest? And what shall be perceived by the players? So there might be a huge difference between both. So we might say, oh, we want community, we want praise, and we want creativity. We want people to be aware of the knowledge and aware of the community they are in. that they want to be compliant with what's happening, that they have the feeling of contributing to something and feeling engaged. Unfortunately, this is what we want to get, and it's not so clear that we will get them. But it's clear that if we create, if we want to create creativity, we have to offer creative moments. We have to offer playfulness. We have to offer maybe building blocks or Lego or Playmobil or Play-Doh in order to make them experience creativity. If we want to create community, we have to make sure that people can experience community. We have to make sure that people are seeing that there's a joint identity, that yes, the others are reinforcing what I'm doing, and we can only do this game together. If we have a killer competitive game, maybe this might be counterproductive as far as the community is concerned. So there is a correlation between what kind of mechanics we put into and what kind of aesthetics we can expect. This is a bit more advanced, but try, and I think it's just normal reasoning that will lead you to what kind of game aesthetics you want to achieve and what kind of game mechanics you have to put into. So let's put this into the test. And of course, it's a very, very simple one. We're devising the game or the interaction experience, and it's a prototype. The project meeting challenge. So we use a task board and a timer. Task board and timer, we have an artifact and a control, and everyone on the team needs to explain his goals at hand and the past and the future tasks. So this is something that we have clear role play. So hey, you come to the board, you say, okay, what have you done over the last week? What are you planning to do in the next week? And everyone gives feedback. So there's a visual progress appraisal by points. People have to vote and evaluate the progress of the others by voting through points. This is almost anonymous. And there are intellectual stimuli cards used for individual feedback. So everyone gets a card and say, hey, my feedback card says I should ask you why probably the next week nothing will have changed from the situation as now, and what will you say next week in order to keep us happy with this situation, and what could you do now to avoid this situation to happen? If you have people to come up with these kind of critical thinking, but it's not on their own, it's by chance that they have to ask this critical thinking, this critical voice, hey, they're accepted and they are playing a role and it's gameplay, right? So yes, we can try that. That's an easy game. That's easy. We can try it, whether this project meeting would work. Good luck. So that leads us to game control. How do we make sure we achieve the right results? So from the very beginning, we said that the key is reaching the business objectives. And we are trying to elicit behavior, we are trying to evoke certain experiences, apply the right game mechanics to the right people, to come up with the right dynamics and the statics of the game. And at the end of the day, what we really want to achieve is business objectives. So how can we make sure this is going into the right direction? So we have before and after. We can do upfront interviews with management to find out what is actually happening and how can we control that. And then we assess the game with the players. assessment of the game with the players is very important. So it's basically play testing. We have a prototype and we play it, and we get afterwards focus group interviews and ask the people, hey, okay, how was your experience? We can do this in an anonymous and survey form, or we can do that in focus group interviews, where we ask people, hey, what's going on? What did you like? What didn't you like? How did you perceive this kind of situation? And mercilessly measure business results. Even if people say, hey, it was good, nice experience, but actually it was kind of a kindergarten event that created a nice feeling for everyone and community for everyone, maybe that was not the goal. Maybe the goal was to come up with great ideas on how to cut costs. And maybe the game was also to make sure that out of the 7 at the table, only 5 will be left at the end of the month, and come up with such a situation. So make sure that you're measuring what counts and continuously improve the game. It is not the case that we can create a game that will be initially perfect. It's almost impossible. So even wonderful game designers cannot guarantee success in their experience. But we can change, and we can apply certain mechanics, we can change them, we can test them, and we can develop the game. So if that is happening, we can go through the steps again and find out while going through our fields whether we are actually still on track and what to improve. So are our business objectives actually the right ones? And are we getting closer to what's happening? Is the desired behavior the one that is actually what is leading to the business objectives? Maybe we have elicited the right behavior, but the behavior wasn't actually the right one because it was not linked to the business objectives. If that's the case, we have to change our desired behavior. And that means probably we have to readjust what's going on in the game. Have we completely understood what was going on in the field? What secret levels people played? In what hidden games they were caught? And yes, maybe our player assessment was plain wrong. And unfortunately, we can only understand what kind of players we have while seeing them play. Okay, and then again, here we go to the interaction design. What are the mechanics and dynamics that we have instilled into the game, and how is it perceived? Is the feel and play exactly as we wanted it? Can we improve it? It can always be improved. The visuals can be better. The music can be cooler. The story can be more thrilling. Of course. The question is, are we achieving our objectives, or are we getting closer there? And yes, that's already it. Go, try, and let the company changing games begin. Ludeo, make, work, play.